Good morning and happy Friday to everyone, and welcome to another video cast from Hendy Consulting, the specialist management consulting firm to the $125 billion FPD display market. And today I just want to highlight some of the intellectual property development we've done on thinking about key topics for the display industry, and here in particularly on M&A strategy across the display industry over the last 2 decades. I joined the FPD industry at 26 and was shortly after that involved in the Philips acquisition of 50% of LG's LCD business in Korea. And through my career I've worked on quite a number of different M&A cases, or either being directly involved in the deal teams and the preparation, or involved in thinking about merger integration and analysis of the deals thereafterwards. And so what I wanted to come through today is just highlight some of the key topics and issues around M&A and displays. So firstly, this article here, which I would encourage you, if you're interested, further down on my profile or through the Information Display magazine, it's actually published. One of the things we did do is a look back to the role of M&A in displays since the early days. And as you can imagine, in the early days, some of it was about the transition of technology out of Japan into Taiwan. And so a number of deals related to that, a number of deals about interested corporates buying in and then exiting the business. So Philips on the whole bought in, and IBM, for example, exited. Sony also bought in and then exited later. So the first range of deals were about growing the industry, moving it to Taiwan. Korea pretty much set up on its own and started with a local strategy, even though it was following probably Japanese general rules on equipment at the early days. Then there's been a transition of using M&A to grow scale, and some of the deals like the AUO deal is a good example of that, and or then moving on into entering China. And so there was a number of M&A deals around putting together the pieces that are the precursors of some of the Chinese organizations, plus consolidation in Taiwan. And I guess then the transition then is from talking about using M&A as a geographical migration path to thinking about what are the fundamental levers for value creation using M&A. And I guess here I would argue, and some of this paper goes into more of my thinking on which are the top topics that actually lead to sustainable value increase. And often I'm talking about technology synergies or product mix synergies as being really strong drivers of creating additional value. I mean, clearly if you're a bigger player picking up a operationally weaker piece off the chessboard, then sometimes that could be useful, but I tend to see the most value creating things as having a product or technology axis. And this is what I'm arguing here, which is what are the main drivers for current level M&A thinking across the industry now. So scale definitely over some of the recent deals has been an important action, and then one could argue certainly the role of government actors has also been there. You could argue that BOE picking up pieces of CEC Panda more recently is the role of the government in trying to tidying up the playing space within China. There is something to be gained out of fab structures, technology sharing, industrial strategy also. And then, as I think I've said to you, I'm a big believer that a technology ender is actually a very important thing. Finally, now actually we're beginning to see the role of M&A and deals in people beginning to leave LCD. So you could talk about the Samsung deal with China Star, where they offloaded a co-owned factory to China Star as Samsung sought to exit the LCD market. So that arena then has been migrating over time. And we then go on to talk about a few specific case examples. One of these here was talking about the BOE and CEC Panda deal, and basically argued that while scale and product portfolio mix was also part of this, there was underneath that there was a potential for the CEC deal to bring originally Sharp IGZO technology into BOE in a stronger sense, where I actually feel that some of that potential has not been reasonably met. But then also that deal ended up bringing portfolio coverage on liquid crystal modes also to BOE at the time. And So that being that one, and then we talked in detail about the potential then that Foxconn had when they brought the pieces together under one major grouping. And again, there was actually quite a lot in the public domain that Sharp put out on their own plans post a Foxconn investment that actually would have made sense. Then you could actually imagine there a major integration planning exercise that could have actually used the benefits of Sharp technology across all of the other pieces where Foxconn had an agenda. Now, what looks like has happened is that Terry Goh in the end agreed to manage Sharp relatively at arm's length, and the whole potential of the upside of the integration plan, most of it looks like it's been pushed out through that agreement, and that's a shame, because actually that whole grouping could have actually ended up being a phenomenal one in terms of leadership in the industry. If you start saying that Innolux, Sharp begin to work together, and the pieces of Century begin to work together. And then finally, we talked a little bit about the motivation and actually the pretty decent merger integration work that Acer and Unipac did together when they formed AUO. And that one actually shows quite a nice case example of the benefits of putting together those two businesses at the time that they were to forming a Taiwanese leading business that could compete against the Koreans in a major way. So anyway, to recap this, what we wanted to talk about is the evolution of the role of M&A in displays over the last 2 decades, and it started out being a geographical migration path. It then also got used for technology development purposes, and then also got used for the development of scale. And I would just argue at a certain point that the returns to scale are less and less important beyond a certain size, and that then product axes and technology axes become the important ones, and or M&A as a lever in players choosing to exit LCD. In a second, then, we're going to go and talk about my views on the future of M&A in displays. So then here now we have the second article in this pair of articles. Information Display called it part 3 because they considered the first piece to be 2 pieces. But now I'm going to talk about what I think the motivations are for M&A in displays as we actually go forward. And I guess my thesis here is I still think that some of the 5 levers that we discussed in the last piece continue to apply in terms of the role of M&A, but also then the role of exiting LCD may become one of the critical drivers. What I also want to argue, and is this one here, is that for some technologies, they are quite a step up over what the industry already knows. And so that's what this Harvey Balls data table here is looking at. And you should see the colour of the black ball as saying how difficult something it is incrementally on what was already stood before it. And so one of my arguments I always want to make is QD-OLED per se and QD-EL are not monumentous, huge changes in terms of competencies compared to previous technologies if you are competing at a certain level already. Right. So if you've already got, for example, an inkjet print capability that's mass market, so say you're Samsung, then moving to QD-EL might be a relatively straightforward path, even though there's quite some new materials work that you'd have to look. But what I'm arguing beyond that is that micro-LED actually as a technology represents a really big opportunity for M&A because it's actually work in a set of competencies across the whole chain. So, is there a role of new equipment in micro LED? Well, certainly. Is there a role of new driving mechanisms and pixel structures or micro ICs for micro LED? Yes, certainly that is. Is there a role of new materials in micro LED? Yes, certainly there is. And you can see the range of Allen Gap and GaN and the Porotech approach and a whole set of different approaches to the materials here for the emitters themselves that is also, for example, a key part of the challenge. And then on the front plane also a range of equipment. So it's the micro LED space to me is ripe for M&A because it requires large pieces and new competencies to be able to move forth. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how different players put the pieces together. And then what we want to discuss finally is just the playground of the pieces currently left on the chessboard that are potentially available for future M&A deals. And I think the insight here is that M&A always happens at the bottom of the cycle. We're right at the bottom of the cycle now. Certainly I've heard rumours already of some combinations being considered in China. But there are a range of smaller pieces that are available in the display industry that frankly ought to probably be consolidated into a larger piece. And so recent news of the bankruptcy of JOLED leaving to a number of the engineers being consolidated back into JDI. That is sort of one corollary of this sort of agenda, but there are a number of other pieces also that sort of stand out as being the basis for ongoing M&A that could happen. Anyway, so if I wanted to summarise the thinking across all of this, M&A has been used as a lever in the display industry over 2 decades, starting primarily with a way of transferring technology across geography, so into Taiwan in principle, and then later into China. It also got used as a method for corporate parents with interest or with interest that then waned to enter and then exit the industry in the first instance. The second path was then the use of M&A to grow scale and to bring together technology competencies and product competencies, and some of that agenda is happening, has happened in the last 10 years, with the M&A always typically happening at the bottom of the cycle. Looking forward now, I think the role of scale is less important, but the levers for product and technology leadership are still important. And the additional one will be people using M&A as a mechanism for exiting LCD. Finally, looking forward, then you want to start saying, well, what is the role of the M&A more generally in the industry looking forward? And what I want to argue is some of these more novel technologies present a opportunity for M&A because they require such broad and such difficult competencies to be brought together in one place to pull off the technology. And that's particularly true for micro-LED. What I'm also arguing is there's simply now too many small pieces left over on the table in China, but also elsewhere, that are probably ripe for either closure, although that's a rare thing in the display industry, or consolidation into other of the main chess pieces. And so we might expect to hear something around now, if not now, the next trough, where China begins to clean house and consolidating into 3 or 4 major leaders. I'm sort of fascinated by the roles of Tianma, HKC and Visionox at the moment as China tier 2s that could be really interestingly put together into a viable third player to sit alongside BOE and ChinaStar. But certainly there could be an ongoing role of M&A in terms of tidying up the playing field for the display space and in particular some of these smaller pieces. So anyway, that's my Friday morning insight. It's a quick scan over the role of M&A in the display industry over 2 decades and the implications for the future. Look forward to your feedback and thoughts.